Oh, yeah, I got a car crash on the way here.
Oh.
Ugh.
Did you think about taking a short rest?
Not enough time, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a bummer.
So today we're talking about lingering injuries. Mostly like what are they, what do they do, and how can a DM use them?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on lingering injuries, Lyndon?
I think lingering injuries, they're a variant rule, meaning that they're not supposed to be played in everybody's table. But they're a really good way to try to up the stakes. They're from the Dungeons Master's Guide, and they're really cool. But the thing is that since they're not very common, not a lot of streams play them, so you're not going to see them very often.
And what are lingering injuries?
Lingering injuries, according to the Dungeons Master's Guide, is happens to you when your character drops to 0 hit points, or they take a lot of damage. And when that happens is they take more than half of their hit points of damage. So if somebody had, if a level 1 player has 12 hit points and they take 6 damage, they might get a lingering injury.
Okay. And what are some examples of lingering injuries?
Examples of lingering injuries, on surface level would be just like a scar, and those add cool benefits such as advantage to your intimidation checks because you're all scarred up, but now you have disadvantage on your persuasion checks.
Because people are scared of you. They're
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah, you're no longer as charming as you used to. You've
Right.
got your very handsome, very charming, devilish rogue character that's been charming his way through, and then all of a sudden he has a big old scar on his face, and all the ladies aren't interested in him anymore.
Right. That's lame. Honestly, I thought chicks dug scars.
Sometimes, but
Comment if you dig scars.
So, these don't really come up in every single combat, and if it does come up in every single combat, you're playing your game too hard.
Right.
But it's a really good way to show your players, hey, this is such a bad scenario, you could lose a leg.
Right.
Or you could, and this is also a way to prevent your clerics from waiting for the fighter to go all the way down to 0 hit points before healing them back up.
Right, because they take too much damage, they could end up getting these serious injuries.
Because you can get a serious injury at 0 hit points, but there's a strategy in Dungeons and Dragons where you let your characters drop to 0 hit points. Because let's say I have 6 hit points and I get hit with 20 damage. I only take 6 damage because I can't take more than 6 damage.
Right.
And so then I can heal. Then the cleric will heal me up, with their D10 plus 4, and I get around 7 hit points back, and I'm back in the game. I could, if the cleric were to have healed me before I took that 20 damage, I'd be 6 plus 7 puts me at 13.
Right.
I still take the 20 damage, and I'm back to ground 0. So generally, it's better to wait until your characters hit 0 hit points before you heal them, which is different than a video game mentality where you're trying to keep your characters topped off.
Right. It's kind of an all or nothing when it comes to health and Dungeons and Dragons.
It's who cares about healing when you can get your 1d10 back in a short rest.
Right. So one thing I've been thinking about this whole time about lingering injuries, I like the idea in media of permanent consequences. Or serious consequences. So, a good example of that is in How to Train Your Dragon. Spoilers if you haven't seen this nearly 20-year-old movie, I guess. But at the very end of the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, Hiccup, the main character, loses his leg. And in the second and third movies, he's still missing a leg. And I really liked that. I like the idea of these permanent consequences or serious consequences that you can't just fix immediately. And so I think that's it'd be an interesting take on Dungeons & Dragons for me at least.
Yeah.
That that your character loses a freaking leg. And I know there's ways to heal it, but I like me personally. I like the idea of these serious injuries that you can't just take care of right away. You're not walking out of every fight unscathed.
But the cool thing about this Hiccup losing a leg, and even Toothless losing part of his tail, both of those are plot points in the story. If you were to like run lingering injuries and people are getting lingering injuries every single fight, then your characters are going to just be beat up constantly.
Right, and there would be no consequence there. It's like if we're expecting to get a concussion this time around.
Right.
Or...
And that's also then you got a disadvantage for all your players because your monsters and all your NPCs, they're not getting lingering injuries.
Right, they're dead.
Yeah, but like every single time you go into a fight, you're missing your leg for the previous fight, and you haven't gotten around to doing an entire week's worth of healing required in order to heal that leg back.
Right.
But the NPCs, they don't have to worry about that. Not unless you specifically planned as like, oh, they're missing a leg because they're a war veteran. The DM is not going to worry about all of these injuries that the NPCs have, even though that they've been in several fights and they've had near-death encounters, but it's just too hard to do that with every single encounter.
Right. They take too much time, too much planning, too much.
Yeah.
Right. No, I like the idea of using lingering injuries as a story point. You mentioned like Jacob losing his leg was a plot point.
Yeah.
I like the idea of doing that. Like that's what I'm doing with Eden's character in The Forgotten God Mikoleth.
Mm-hmm.
Her character has it's a bit of a homebrewed idea with it. So what I'm doing with it is I have Eden's character having migraines,
right?
For story reasons. So every so often, if you watch Forgotten God Mikoleth, I'll say you start having a splitty migraine. And I think what I was doing with her is I'm giving her disadvantage on all our attacks because of the migraine. And you can have fun with these lingering injuries. I mean, you can do stuff like that. You can go so far as to have characters be horribly scarred and debilitated from the beginning, and that could be a deliberate character choice as well.
Right. I've always thought about like doing the blind swordsman.
Oh, okay.
And like you start off with a fighter, and then there's a fighting style called the blind fighting style that allows you to know everything that is within 10 feet of you, even like invisible creatures.
This is some Toph-like stuff going on.
Yeah, you got some Toph-like stuff going on, and like you can do some really cool stuff with that. But at the same time, it's like when you're blind, you struggle with all that distance. It's like the fighter already is missing a lot of utility. Right. And now they're like less receptive, and it's been hard for me to think about. Because I once played a character that was cursed to.
Yeah, curse is a good example of a lingering injury as well.
Yeah, I had a character once who was cursed to obey everything he was told.
Oh yeah, you're telling me this guy.
And it stunk because I wasn't really vibing with what the whole party was doing. And if I wanted to do something else besides what the party was doing, I had to bandwagon it with them. And one aspect, and this was when I was younger, and I wasn't the best player at the time.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to go out on my own and do my own thing. And but all the players had to do is say, "Hey, be quiet," and I couldn't participate in the conversation anymore.
That you had to stop talking.
Yeah.
That'd be a really frustrating one to play.
It was really frustrating, and it's like the Kenku race is is automatically created with a curse.
Right, they're the ones that they don't have any words of their own. They have to piece together bits of conversation they've heard. Correct?
Yeah, and so that's why people don't like playing the Kenku race, is because it's so hard to vocalize their thoughts. And when people do play a Kenku, usually the DM is like, hey, just talk normally. Another way you can run, if you wanted to have a more intense form of D&D, is another variant rule that has if you wanted to do a dark fantasy setting, is change how your rests work out. Because most of your healing comes from your rests.
Right. It comes from your short rest or your long rest. So the idea behind this variant rule is that you can, is that a short rest and a long rest take longer. So I think in base D&D, a long rest is like 12 hours or something.
A long rest is 8 hours.
8 hours, okay. And then a short rest is like 4, right?
It's 1 hour.
1 hour, okay. So I believe in this variant rule you're telling me about, it's like 8 hours for a short rest, and then a long rest is like a whole week.
Yeah. And that's like a whole week of downtime, which is harder because like how do you plan your downtime? And that's really up to the DM.
Right, and it's got to be like, oh, we're spending a week in this inn, waiting for, the herald to come and tell us and give us our note that tells us what we need, or that's we made camp after a long fight,
right?
Or a long hike, a long fight, a long whatever, and we're just gonna rest for a while. But a whole week is a long time in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. If I were to run this rule, personally, I would say that you're allowed to have fights within that week and still get your long rest in, as long as you are able to get 7 short rests.
So 1 short rest a day, essentially.
Yeah. If you can have 7 short rests in a row, then you're good.
Right. So how do you heal a lingering injury?
How do you heal a lingering injury?
Like in base D&D rules, how do you heal it?
So you could do a healing, like a week's worth of first level, like 1st to 5th level healing spells. And that means like I do a cure wounds on the person every single day for a week.
Okay.
And then their leg comes back.
Okay.
But like that has like something that has to happen during your long rest period, and you're just like, okay, let's heal this up. And that's they're missing that leg, and they get all the disadvantages of missing that leg for an entire week.
Okay.
And like some stories, that's a very short time. In other D&D sessions or D&D campaigns, that's a very long time.
Right. Like there are some live plays I've watched where like each encounter takes place like 4 or 5 days after the last one.
Yeah.
Like it's essentially a series of one-shots that tell a bigger story, which I think is interesting. I've seen other ones where it's like they pick up like in Mikalef, you're picking up right where you left off.
Right.
So it'd be a lot harder to do a week in Mikalef than it would be in some other sessions.
You're basically waiting until you level up before you get your leg.
Pretty much. Man. Alright, well hey, if you enjoyed this, give us a like. Comment below any lingering injuries or blights that you've done that you think that have worked, and the ones you don't think that works, those are just as good.
Also, if you did the dark setting where you have the longer rest required in order to get that rest benefit, let me know how that worked out. If maybe you can recommend any variants to that rule before I start applying it to my personal games.
Right. And thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.
Have a good one.